Melancholy from 1995 and Machina's album from 2000. I didn't really explain the story, and it caused a ton of confusion. It still causes a ton of confusion. So on this one, the third concept album by the Smashing Pumpkins, the third in the trilogy, we're actually going to explain the story as we go. So we have the benefit of knowing the story before you actually hear the song. So that, I think, will be a unique experience both for me and for everybody here. The story is, if you were making a movie, and hopefully you'll make the movie in your mind as I explain it, you'll come up on a spaceship floating in space. You don't know what that spaceship is. We'll talk about that in the next episode. But that you see a ship floating in space. And from that ship floating in space, it's a very small craft, beautifully designed. And in real life, we've actually designed a spaceship with a true Hollywood designer. So when you see that, you'll understand why it's so cool. Down to Earth, we go into a world that's beset by riots and dissent and unhappiness and a lot of strife. Now we float back into space. We zoom past the spacecraft that we don't know what it's doing. And now we float onto the dark side of the moon. And what do we see? We see things that we didn't know were there. Pyramids, crystal towers. The rumor that on the dark side of the moon, which is why the moon mission originally went up there to find what was really on the dark side of the moon, to quote the Pink Floyd album, that there is a bunch of stuff there. So you see at the opening of the movie, you see that the world that you've been told is real isn't as real as you've been told it is. And you float out into space, you go past Mars, you see the face on Mars, you see the pyramids on Mars, which many people have documented, and you float towards the sun. As you get closer to the sun, you realize the sun isn't what you always were told it was. And I'll leave that to your own imagination for the moment. And that is the opening of the movie. It's important to break down that what you've been told about the world, and I'm talking about every level, language, self-perception, what success is, what happiness is, who controls the narrative of the world, whether it's a religion, a government, a social media company, that it's worth considering that what you've been told may not only not be real, but there might be reasons you're being told something not real to convince you of something to keep you on a particular side of the street. It has been shown over time that people in power tend to abuse power, and they oftentimes convince themselves, and I have had these conversations with powerful people in the world, they convince themselves that their motive for controlling the narrative of the world, in essence, occluding normal people like us from the truth, in quotations, is they actually think they're doing us a favor. That if we knew how chaotic the world really was, if we really knew how dangerous the world really was, none of us could really handle it. That's one of the things that people talk about in regards to, well, why doesn't the government just admit that there are UFOs? And lately they've been, for some reason, releasing footage saying, oh, this is from a government aircraft. So the thought on the conspiratorial side is that if we all knew that there were UFOs and that maybe religion wasn't as it was espoused to be in the way that it was espoused in the Bible or some other religious text, that everyone would just lose their mind and the world would fall apart at the seams. I believe that the point of the musical starts from this very perspective of the world that you believe you see isn't the world as it is. And that is intrinsic to what the musical's after in its narrative form over 33 songs. Yes, it's the third chapter in the story of Zero turned glass, now turned shiny.